Our response to violence is always love and forgiveness.
The Bishop of Phoenix reacts to the killing of one of his brother priests. Iraq's government tries frantically to stabilize the nation as thousands flee a militant surge. Coming from Argentina, Pope Francis is a soccer fan, and he's released a video message for the World Cup starting today in Brazil.
I'm Jason Calvi covering the Bishops' gathering here in New Orleans. Coming up, lace up your shoes. We're going to go for a run with a bishop.
Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for Thursday, June 12th, 2014. Good evening from Washington. I'm Brian Patrick, and there is shock, sadness, prayers, and many questions in Phoenix tonight. Police there have no suspect as they investigate the killing of one priest and the vicious beating of another. Police received a call about a burglary at Mother of Mercy Mission near the state capitol just after 9 last night. Sergeant Steve Mardo says officers found two priests badly injured. One had been shot and died at the hospital. The other was severely beaten and is hospitalized tonight.
The one that was killed was just ordained in the last year, so he's a very young priest. And Father Terra would be in his 50s and is the pastor. He's been a very hardworking, loving pastor.
When you're talking about individuals who are coming into a location like this, to a church facility, commit a crime like this against individuals or victims like this, one can only imagine what they were likely to do.
Mardo says the injured priest, 56-year-old Father Joseph Terra, was able to call 911 and direct authorities to the church. ABC 15 in Phoenix reports Father Terra gave 29-year-old Father Ken Walker last rites just as police arrived. At the Bishops' Conference in New Orleans, Bishop Thomas Olmsted of Phoenix expressed hope and consolation.
Death for us who have been baptized into Christ, into his death and resurrection, means that death is really a doorway into eternal life. So we pray with great hope, and there's a great consolation that comes with that.
The attack occurred in the rectory. Investigators are still trying to determine if robbery was a motive.
Serve God, pray for us sinners.
Parishioners are badly shaken.
We just had this gathering together, and now they're both been shot, one dead, and it's unbelievable.
You don't steal from priests. They will give you your dinner, their dinner plate filled with food. They will give it to you. They will give you whatever you want. This is senseless evil.
Both priests belong to the priestly fraternity of St. Peter. The diocese issued a short statement asking for prayers for Father Walker's family, as well as for the health and complete recovery of Father Terra. Now, some of the other stories our EWTN News Nightly team has been covering in today's world. After years of captivity, Army Sergeant Bo Bergdahl is coming back to the U.S. A U.S. defense official says Bergdahl is scheduled to arrive Thursday at Brooke Army Medical Center in Texas. He was released from Taliban captivity May 31st and has been recuperating in Germany. He was deployed in eastern Afghanistan when he disappeared in June 2009. Today, the former lieutenant governor of New York told the House Veterans Affairs Committee that bills passed by Congress this week to shorten wait times for vets won't work.
But I'm here today to express my concern that this bill passed in the Senate yesterday, the McCain-Sanders bill, will not save the lives of vets stuck on the wait list. This bill, as currently written, is designed to protect union jobs, not ailing vets.
Dr. McCaughey says the bill requires all veterans who want civilian care to get a letter from the Secretary of the VA confirming that they've waited an unacceptable amount of time for treatment. And that's not all. Listen to this.
Secondly, if a VA does manage to get the letter and get the choice card and get to a civilian doctor, then he has to hand the card to the doctor who is instructed to call the VA and get prior approval before treatment. Good luck getting somebody to answer that phone call.
Dr. Betsy McCaughey on Capitol Hill today. With Eric Cantor's resignation as House Majority Leader now pending, the GOP now needs to find new leadership. After losing Virginia's Republican primary, Cantor announced this week he will step down from the leadership role July 31st. Texas Congressman Lee Henzerling says he will not run for House Majority Leader. So that leaves two candidates vying for the position, Pete Sessions of Texas and Kevin McCarthy of California. The new leader will be chosen next Thursday. House Speaker John Boehner says he's not taking sides. He will work with whoever is elected. Well, it's being called a state of emergency in Iraq tonight. Thousands of Iraqi families are fleeing north after terrorists invaded their homes. The government is scrambling, trying to stabilize the nation. Our Wyatt Goolsby joins us to cover the story tonight.
Brian, the Iraqi ambassador to the U.S. says that his people and his country are being threatened, intimidated, and killed by terrorists regardless of religious or ethnic background. Iraqi officials both here in the U.S. and around the world say the situation is so bad they'll need help from their allies and neighbors. A sea of cars in the middle of the desert. Residents fleeing the city of Mosul packed the checkpoint on their way north to the Kurdish region. An estimated 500,000 people have left Iraq's second largest city after fighters from an al-Qaeda-inspired group took control of the city and several other key areas.
Around Mosul, we were afraid for our children. Iraq has collapsed. All the troops left. Only the Kurdish brothers remained. We are from outside of Mosul, and all the soldiers are gone.
Many families like Suad's are relying on food and shelter provided by Kurdish authorities and international relief agencies.
This is potentially worse than what we saw during the Iraq War. This is trending towards a full-scale, confessional civil war.
Stephen Bucci, who has served decades as an Army Special Forces officer and Pentagon official, says there are a number of reasons why violence broke out on such a large scale. But he says policies from this White House haven't helped.
To be honest with you, this administration really didn't want to be associated with the war in Iraq, which they saw as George Bush's war. So by leaving precipitously that way, this cycle of deterioration began.
One bright spot, the hundreds of volunteers in Baghdad who signed up to fight the militants.
The Iraqi young people have started since yesterday, flocking to the recruitment center to volunteer and join the Iraqi army. Hundreds of young people and even old men come to volunteer to defend Iraq and its sacred places in all its areas.
But this fight is far from over. The terrorists have vowed to march on Baghdad. President Obama says Iraq will need additional help. The president did not specify what type of assistance he's willing to provide, but he did say the White House has not ruled anything out. The Iraqi ambassador says that his country is getting equipment and training from the U.S. In the meantime, humanitarian organizations are focused on helping the people who have been displaced. Brian.
All right, more refugees. Thank you, Wyatt. Afghanistan prepares now for a second round of voting this Saturday. It's a runoff to elect a president who will lead that country after international troops withdraw. Afghan police searched vehicles at almost every intersection in a massive security operation ahead of Saturday's vote. The Taliban has warned voters not to participate in, quote, that American process, but Afghan President Hamid Karzai is telling people to go to the polls and count on security forces to keep them safe. Hundreds of Palestinian mourners gathered today for the funeral of a Hamas fighter killed in an Israeli airstrike. Hamas is an Islamic militant movement designated a terrorist group by Israel and by the U.S. The late-night raid wounded 3 other people. It came hours after Palestinian militants fired a rocket into southern Israel. It was the first such attack since President Mahmoud Abbas and his unity government took office. Well, the church will celebrate 6 new saints later this year. Pope Francis met with the College of Cardinals in the Apostolic Palace today, praying together and voting on those canonizations. They decided 6 blesseds will be declared saints this November 23rd, the Feast of Christ the King.
Bardis, Eufrasia Massacro Corde, Amatum Ronconi.
That's Cardinal Angelo Amato speaking in Latin. He is the head of the Congregation for the Causes of Saints. That Vatican office oversees the process of declaring saints. 2 of these future saints are from India. The other 4 are Italian. And as the World Cup begins today in Brazil, Pope Francis has a message for the players and millions of fans across the world.
This sport is not only a form of entertainment, but also, and above all, I would say, a tool to communicate values and promote the good of the human person, to help build a more peaceful and fraternal society.
Excitement for the opening match between Brazil and Croatia was mounting today. Meanwhile, a 5-day subway strike and the threat of more protest sparked an active police presence near the soccer stadium. The Holy Father is also tweeting about this huge sporting event, saying on Twitter, "I wish everyone a wonderful World Cup played in a spirit of true fraternity." Well, people all over the world and beyond will be watching the World Cup. The 3 crew members on board the International Space Station are gearing up for the Cup. American Steve Swanson, Reed Wiseman, and German Alexander Gerst kicked around a soccer ball in zero gravity. That looks like a lot of fun. The 3 say they'll be cheering on their teams from 230 miles above the Earth. Coming up, he's not your ordinary runner. His Excellency is a Catholic bishop. Jason Calvi has his story from New Orleans tonight. And is Pope Francis coming to Philly for the World Meeting of Families? We asked the event's director of programming. On this Thursday evening, June 12th, you're watching EWTN News Nightly. Glad you're here. I'm Brian Patrick. We go to New Orleans now, where EWTN News Nightly's Jason Calvi is covering the Bishops' Conference. Jason?
Hey, Brian. The U.S. bishops gathering here in New Orleans kind of went back to school, so to speak, today. They heard from 2 professors. Helen Alvarez, who's a law professor at George Mason University, spoke about poverty and the new evangelization. And Brad Wilcox spoke about marriage and its impact, really, on the economy. You know, bishops are the chief pastors, the chief preachers, and really the chief teachers in their diocese. And today, one bishop let us tag along to show us what he does to keep balance in his life. Would you believe this bishop dons goalie pads and plays ice hockey once a week? He's also up before dawn. 6 this morning, sunrise over the Mississippi River in New Orleans. Bishop Thomas Peprocki of Springfield, Illinois, is running for his life.
I got into running when I was a senior in high school, basically for health reasons. I had 3 of my grandparents died before I was born. They had heart attacks when they were in their mid-50s.
At 61, Bishop Peprocki has outlived his grandparents and run 20 marathons. We slowed His Excellency down today. His personal best marathon time was 3 hours, 25 minutes.
I'm inspired very much by St. Paul in his letter to the Corinthians, his first letter to the Corinthians, where he said that we are temples of the Holy Spirit. You know, so I think a big part of that is how I take care of my body.
And his mind.
When I come back from a run, I'm very refreshed, and a lot of times the problems that were bothering me or perplexing me, I've put them out of my mind.
Out here, he prays for people in need, meditates, and says the rosary.
Especially when I'm running a marathon. You could say a lot of Hail Marys during a marathon.
And while running those marathons, he's raised over nearly $400,000 for charity. This is a really interesting bishop. Before he was ordained a priest, actually after he was ordained a priest, he went to law school and is still currently a lawyer. And just recently, last year, he graduated from the University of Notre Dame with an MBA. I should add, Brian, that there's 3 bishops that are in the United States who are avid runners.
Well, Jason, I know from personal experience, Baton Rouge Bishop Bob Munch is an avid handball player. He doesn't like losing. But back to business. What will the bishops be doing tomorrow there?
One main action item tomorrow is prayer. They're going to be going to Mass. They're going to have a holy hour with spiritual conference. And they're also going to have the opportunity themselves to go to the sacrament of confession. We're going to be featuring many of these bishops on our program tomorrow. Brian?
All right. We look forward to that coverage from you and Mark Irons there in New Orleans. Thank you, Jason. Archbishop Charles Chaput has invited all of the U.S. bishops and Pope Francis, of course, to the World Meeting of Families in Philadelphia next fall. There'll be plenty to do and see there. The World Meeting has just appointed a theology professor to plan its programs and activities. Dr. Mary Beth Yount will serve as Director of Content and Programming. If Pope Francis comes, the meeting could draw 1 million pilgrims. Organizers of the 2015 event pictured here, there they are. They're carrying on a tradition started by St. John Paul II in 1994. Since then, every 3 years, families from around the globe meet. They study and celebrate Catholic teaching on the family. You also saw the family of Dr. Yount, who came from Philadelphia to join us tonight. It's great to have you with us.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Archbishop Chaput seems pretty confident, and others too, that Pope Francis will be there. How does that affect the way you plan for this huge event?
We're definitely planning on him coming. There's been no official confirmation yet. They don't normally confirm that until 4 to 6 months out, but it is traditional for the popes to attend these, and it's Pope Francis we're talking about, so we're pretty confident.
He's very strong on family. Pope Benedict had planned to come, so there's real optimism that Francis will. But this is more than a prospective papal visit. This is a conference on the family that draws people from around the world. How do you go about planning the program for this?
Piece of cake.
Really?
No, no. No, it's not. The way the process works, and this is the same for every World Meeting of Families. A catechesis, preparatory catechesis, we call it, is written in the site where it's going to be held. So you mentioned it moves around from country to country. This is going to be the first time in the United States for the World Meeting of Families. So we start out by writing a preparatory catechesis.
So this is really about learning about our faith, living it within the family.
It is. It's what do we as a Catholic Church, and particularly as a United States Catholic Church, think it's important to engage people in.
What are some of those things that you'll touch on?
The topics aren't quite approved yet, so I have to be careful what I say.
What are some you hope to touch on?
Yes. The first general session, the big topic that we're proposing is created for joy and love. And in that, we talk about things like being created in God's image and how do you live out your ultimate destiny as an individual, as a family. We're trying to make sure that these kinds of topics are inclusive, so that if a single person shows up, maybe even a single person who has been looking to be married or has chosen consecrated celibacy or is single for other reasons, they too have a place in this conference and can benefit from this conference.
You, though, like many others, have a family.
I do.
A husband and 4 children. And you're very involved, very active. Tell us a little bit about your background.
Okay. I have a bachelor's degree in theology with a strong education in philosophy and education, and then master's in theology and a doctorate in theology. But I think the thing that came into play for my hiring in this position is that I also have a lot of administrative and program administration experience.
How did they pick you?
I was first invited to help write the preparatory catechesis, and at the time I was like, oh, this is such a huge legacy. I never thought I'd get to do anything like this, because it becomes really an official church document. So I was invited to do that, and I contributed to it and wrote a section of it. And next thing I know, Bishop McIntyre and Donna called me into their office, into a meeting, and I thought, oh, you know, maybe they're going to ask how Newman University, because I'm a professor at Newman University, could be involved in the World Meeting of Families. And we're sitting there, we're talking, and they're talking about, you know, organizing speakers, and then they start adding on more tasks and more tasks. And
so pretty soon you're in charge.
Well, and I start thinking, wait a second, what's going on here? Yeah. And I said, so what kind of time commitment are you thinking about? And Donna Farrell, the executive director of the World Meeting of Families, goes, oh, it's full time. And I was like,
with 4 kids. Let's talk very briefly about the kind of fun stuff that will be available for families.
Yeah, we're planning, like, the content is important, but the content has to be sent out in a way that engages everybody. So we're planning huge fun activities. We sat down and we said, what do families do together? They pray together. They play together. They eat. They exercise. And so we're looking at all of the kinds of, for example, with the eating part, which is going to be one of my family's favorites.
I'm sure. Ours too.
With the eating part, we're talking about nutrition. We're talking about families cooking together. One suggestion I had, and all these aren't approved, so we don't know for sure that this will happen. But this is
we won't hold you to it.
Right, right. This is what this is what I'm really hoping for. I said, there's so much mystery around unleavened bread and the Eucharist for children and adults alike. So perhaps we could have cooking demonstrations of here's how the Eucharist is made, here's what it means to have unleavened bread, all those kinds of things. Wow. Creating family cookbooks together.
And a lot to look forward to at the World Meeting of Families in Philadelphia in the fall of next year. We appreciate you being with us, Dr. Yount. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me, Brian.
Well, the European Court of Human Rights ruled today that a Catholic bishop has the right not to renew the contract of a religion teacher who opposes church teaching. In the case of Fernandez Martin versus Spain, a religion teacher had joined a campaign opposing Catholic teaching on celibacy. And a Spanish model and actress has left the catwalk for the convent. Olala Olivares starred in advertisements and TV shows during her short acting career. Then, on a trip to Fatima, she started to picture herself in a nun's habit and couldn't shake the idea. Oliveira said she couldn't refuse God's call. Well, last month, she entered the semi-cloistered Order of St. Michael. Up next, a congressman who was in France for last week's D-Day commemoration shares the experience with us tonight. And what would you do to celebrate your 90th birthday? A former president delivers on an ambitious promise. We are very grateful you're joining us tonight on EWTN News Nightly. I'm Brian Patrick, and a week ago tomorrow, the world commemorated the 70th anniversary of D-Day. World leaders gathered on the beaches of Normandy in northern France, remembering that massive Allied invasion that changed history forever. President Obama, speaking at the commemoration, described D-Day with vivid language. By daybreak, blood soaked the water, he said. The presidents of France, Germany's chancellor, and the Queen of England were also there marking the historical day. And Nebraska Congressman Jeff Fortenberry was there as well, and we're glad to welcome you back.
Always good to be here. Thank you, Brian.
Your grandfather died in France in World War II. I'll bet this ceremony was extremely meaningful and moving for you.
It really was in a number of ways. First of all, what a privilege to be there to represent America, to give honor to those who sacrificed so much, who fought and died, to be with the veterans who are still living and came back for the ceremony, but also in a special way be present in memory of my own family's sacrifice. It was really special.
When you see those guys, they're 88, 89, 90 years old, and realize they were teenagers, some of them, on D-Day, that has to just really get you to thinking about the sacrifice that was made.
It really is amazing. When you stand at the American Cemetery, which is on the hillside overlooking Omaha Beach, where we had most of our difficulty, and you think about how civilization hung in the balance. And it was the effort of 18, 19-year-olds, sometimes 16-year-olds, who simply hit that beach under a hail of German gunfire, mortar fire. It's hard to get the mind around the horror that ensued, but they got it done, inch by inch.
They called them the greatest generation, and we're looking at some of the crosses there at Omaha Beach. What did the veterans who are still alive tell you when you talked to them? I know you greeted some of them.
I did, and I think that was perhaps the most meaningful part of the trip. They were all of such good cheer, so grateful to be there, so grateful that we wanted to hear their stories. In fact, one man said, "I haven't been here in 70 years. Much better reception this time."
And you, of course, are on a congressional subcommittee that protects veterans. How can we best honor our veterans?
Well, you know, one thing that I think is a simple thing that many people could do is to encourage the person who served in the greatest generation, World War II, forward to our current conflicts to tell their story. In fact, the Library of Congress has something called the Veterans History Project. Through my office, we encourage veterans to sit down and record their stories. We'll work with veterans. I think most congressional offices probably have some outreach in that regard. We give the recording to the family. It's one of the ways in which we can preserve those memories, those treasured memories in our national archives, but for families as well. And particularly in this difficult time where we're going through a lot of turmoil in VA, maybe that's a good thing, a positive thing to do that'll be helpful to the individuals who are out there to restore their memories.
Yeah, we're glad you're doing it.
Yeah.
Congressman Fortenberry, thanks for joining us. I hope you come back soon.
Great to be with you. Thank you.
Well, we are learning tonight that President Obama is in excellent health. The president's doctors released a report today based on his physical exam last month. Aside from taking ibuprofen for muscle soreness on his right foot, he is in great shape, according to his doctors. He's a former smoker who they say remains tobacco-free with just an occasional use of Nicorette gum. This is the first time in nearly 3 years the White House has made public the president's bill of health. Well, he's not the only president in good health. Former president and World War II veteran George H.W. Bush celebrated his 90th birthday today, and even though he can no longer use his legs, he took a leap of faith with a tandem parachute jump. Delivering on a vow he made 5 years ago, our 41st president jumps out of a helicopter near his summer home in coastal Maine. The chopper picked him up at his home this morning. His family moved him from a wheelchair to the chopper, singing "Happy Birthday." Bush could later be seen floating to the ground with a red, white, and blue parachute. He lands safely and softly at St. Anne's Church to a waiting, cheering crowd, and then on to his wheelchair. Happy birthday, President Bush, and thanks for watching tonight. We'll see you tomorrow. Until then, you can like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and watch us anytime you want, again, on EWTN's YouTube page. For all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, I'm Brian Patrick. Good night, and God bless you.